Well, howdy there, Internet people. It's Bo again. So, today we're going to talk about one of the many close calls we've had with the unthinkable. In a few videos, I've said that normally when we're actually close to the unthinkable happening, the public doesn't know. And on the live stream recently, somebody asked and was like, hey, can you tell us one of those stories? And yes, we can. We'll talk about one. There's a few. I may do another one later. But this is one of the more interesting ones, and one that's kind of easy to research if you want to learn a little bit more about it. It happened in 1983, and NATO had just finished a large-scale conventional exercise. I want to say that one was called Autumn Forge. And they followed it up with an exercise called Able Archer. And Able Archer was a role-playing thing. They were training to release nuclear weapons. So all of these generals are involved, and they're wargaming a Soviet invasion of Western Europe. They wanted it to be real, so they used encrypted communications. They involved heads of state in this training exercise. Bases around the world would respond to the orders of the people playing the war game. So planes would get loaded and stuff like that. The original scenario was that, I want to say, Soviet tanks rolled across Yugoslavia and caught NATO by surprise. So NATO fell back, and they could never really kind of reverse it, and they just kept getting beat. So eventually, the people playing this war game decided to enact a nuclear signal, which, if you want to know how crazy the Cold War was, there was the belief that you could avoid a major nuclear incident by destroying a major city with a nuclear weapon, and that the opposition would read that as a signal. In the war game, NATO elected to destroy the capital of Ukraine. The war game continued from there, and the signal was not received well by the Soviet side in the training exercise, and a back and forth occurred, and the entire world was destroyed in the war game. So that's what happened in the war game, in the training exercise. Meanwhile, in the real world, the Soviets were concerned because I want to say it was medium-range missiles. NATO was deploying medium-range missiles around the same time, and they kind of believed that the whole training exercise was actually a cover to engage in a first strike against Warsaw Pact. This was further complicated by the fact that the KGB had their case officers, their spies, operating under this policy that allowed them to report observations. They couldn't provide estimates or assessments or analysis. They could only report what they saw. So, hey, this plane was loaded. And that's what the Soviet leadership got. So they became incredibly worried. They loaded live nuclear weapons onto planes and stayed at an incredibly high alert the entire time. NATO didn't know any of that was happening. They had no clue. And eventually, as things started to get noticed, there was one Air Force officer who was like, okay, maybe we should just stop escalating on our side and see what happens. And the Soviets calmed down. That occurred in 1983. The presidential finding on it was written in 1990. And I don't think the public found out about it for like another decade or two. But we were pretty close at that moment. You had one side who was ready to go. And if you've heard me talk about this before, you know, I keep saying it takes both sides to make a mistake at the same time. In that case, the Soviets made a mistake. They misread NATO's intentions. If NATO had made a mistake at the same time and misread the Soviet intentions, it's safe to say you wouldn't be watching this video right now because none of us would be here. Now, there have been some academics who've looked at this information and said, well, it really wasn't that close. I've read the report. It seemed pretty close to me. It definitely appears that Soviet leadership was incredibly concerned with this exercise. And while maybe it wasn't as imminent as the presidential finding made it out to be, it was way too close for comfort. So this is one of those things, and this pattern repeats in pretty much every one of these stories. If you know about it, if there are tensions that are heightened and they're in the news, odds are we're probably not that close. And you may have been closer in your own lifetime, because I know there's probably quite a few of y'all who were alive in '83. Anyway, it's just a thought. Y'all have a good day.